Good morning, everyone. Today on the show, we're diving deep into the intricate, exhilarating, and sometimes chaotic world of high-end residential renovations in New York City, where vision meets execution and where every decision down to the grout color or crown molding profile can make or break a space. If you've ever dreamed of turning a historic brownstone into your dream home or wondered what really happens behind the scenes of a luxury apartment transformation, this episode is for you. Our guests today are the creative forces behind their businesses and made a name for themselves by taking some of the city's most ambitious and complex renovations to conclusion. From pre-war co-ops to endless quirks and sleek penthouses with million-dollar views, turning old bones into modern masterpieces. They've got a sharp eye for detail, a deep respect for craftsmanship, and a sixth sense for problem solving in the most demanding construction environment in the country. Whether it's sourcing rare materials, decoding New York City building codes, or navigating the politics of a co-op board, there's almost nothing they haven't seen or solved. We're going to get into all of it today. And at the table with me today are Johnny Cheeks, the founder of My Beautiful Home, and Anjali Pollack Design, and they join me now to discuss. But first, let me welcome my listeners and my viewers from across the United States and all around the globe. I am Vince Rocco, and this is Talking New York Real Estate. So let's go behind the headlines and inside real estate, the state of our industry.
Hey, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. As an official moving partner of Brown Harris Stevens, we know that your clients deserve more than just a move. At Roadway Moving and Storage, we turn moving into an experience they will love. From specialized services to a white glove treatment, we've got it all covered. When you choose Roadway, you're choosing a peace of mind for your clients. Plus, our referral program is the most rewarding in the industry. Want to learn more? Shoot me an email at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, everybody, we're back, and exciting show today. We're talking about interior design renovations here in New York City. I'm going to ask these guys, some really direct questions, and one of the things I really want to know is how we get through the process. We all know, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to fix that, we're going to renovate here, we're going to renovate, change, upgrade, update, whatever. But it is a process, and it can go as smoothly as you make it. But Johnny, let me ask you, up front, what is can you walk us through your thoughts when somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to renovate my apartment. I've never done this before. I really want to change, X, Y, and Z. But we don't really understand what that entails. What goes through your mind, and then what is your response immediately back to that potential client coming up?
So I would say that the discovery phase is just as important as the project itself. It's always important to figure out as early as possible that we are the right fit for that potential customer. So in our particular case, if someone's looking to just do some light resurfacing like cabinetry or just replace one aspect of a space like floor tile in a kitchen, that's not necessarily the type of services that we provide, as we're more full scale. But we really discuss things like what's your overall plan for the property, whether it's your forever home or if it's just a pit stop and it's more of an investment, because those answers really help us curate those materials accordingly. Budget also, a lot of times they don't have a budget set in their mind, although sometimes they might be holding that back for the time being.
I was going to ask you about that. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
But as soon as we have that in-depth conversation initially, from there we'll take next steps. So if everything aligns, we explain our services to them and they agree that's what they're looking for. We'll do an in-person walkthrough, take our preliminary measurements, evaluate the space and its condition, because if there's more work that we see needs to be done, especially behind the walls, if there's a leak, that affects pricing as well. So we get as thorough as we can in that initial discovery phase.
And you never know what's going to go on behind walls. I mean, I've learned that when I've renovated in the past. But it's really important because you said something, and when I went to renovate a couple of times in my life, and you guys are the experts, a hell of a lot more than I do or a client, I really didn't even know what I wanted to do. I want a new kitchen, or I want a new bathroom, or I want this or that. Mm-hmm. But I really didn't know. And as far as budget is concerned, I didn't have that either. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Anjali, so when someone comes to you right off the bat and says, hey, I'm thinking about renovating my apartment, or I want to renovate my apartment, what is going through your mind? I mean, he kind of, made incredible points there. I felt that because I was a client at one point. But is that kind of standard for most clients? They don't really know what's happening, and you need to be the one who tells them, hey, this is what we have to do, and this is why.
So I think it depends. I think you get both sides. I think there are more and more people who are quite educated, especially as you get older and you've done this before. If you've done this before, then you have some knowledge of it. If you've never done it before, you're a totally different animal, right? But if you have done it before, you have some idea. But even then, prices have changed so much. So you may have done a renovation, but so I always start nowadays with saying, off the bat, I want to tell you, it's even embarrassing for me as a designer to tell you what this is going to cost. So I want to be as honest and transparent as possible because regardless of what you decide, whether you're going to do the most high-end luxury kitchen or you're just going to get cabinetry done by your contractor,
right,
it's still going to be a price point that's going to give you sticker shock at this point.
Yes.
And then some people get over that and some people don't, right?
Yeah, if I told you what I paid 25 years ago, you wouldn't believe it because I can only imagine what it is today.
And that's really, so it's really being quite transparent. And to speak back to what Johnny said, it's really in that discovery phase, understanding really what somebody wants and trying to give them the clearest picture of what that entails, right? How many people will you have in your home and how long will that take? So the two key things are how much will it cost and how long will it take? And to be truthful about that, because people lie about that and say, oh, 8 weeks.
Of course they do.
It's not going to be 8 weeks. Really, it's really not going to be. And then...
It's very true. And that's a very good point because time and money are really what people want to know.
Exactly.
In my business, on the other side, selling something to a client. In the past, lots of people wanted a project. We used to call it a project, okay? They want to buy something and they want to renovate whatever. Now they're a little leery because the timeline could be a little longer. The costs, as you indicate, have gone up. But what I teach in school about New York City real estate in general is that it is completely and totally different from anywhere else in the world, including our immediate suburbs, okay?
Oh, absolutely.
Agreed.
Transacting real estate in New York City is unbelievably complicated and difficult. So my question to you, Johnny, is how does that relate to renovations and design? Is it more complicated because it's here in New York City, or is it on par with any place else?
It's funny the way that you ask that because it's a little bit of both. Although our average customer is typically leaving a current place and closing on a new property, and they have to be in by a certain time. So although our timelines, we don't have that luxury per se of having a long lead time for super custom materials and finishes, it actually streamlines our process because it limits the amount of choices that a client has. So we use our extensive network of vendors, both here locally and online, based on those timelines when a client has to be in the property by. And it actually, to me, makes things a little bit easier. There's millions and millions of options out there, and when you have too much choice, it can delay, you can overanalyze, you can think twice over something that you initially loved. So for us, it limits that overwhelming feeling of having too much to pick from.
Yeah, and on that score, I was going to ask you about, the misunderstanding with, materials that people can actually choose at, in their renovations. How easy is it for you guys to recommend or to even outline what kind of materials are available? And with all that said, what about the supply chain? Because there are certain things that we can't get on a timely basis, so that's going to interfere with timeline, right? How much do people not really understand about the materials that are available? You mentioned before about you want to do a very high-end luxury kitchen. You want to do just, I'm not going to, well, I'll use the word IKEA, whatever, something very low cost.
Yeah.
How do people decide on what the material is or in actually what the design is? If I'm hiring experts like you, hey, come on in and make my place look like, whatever, beautiful.
Well, I'm curious to
How
get
do you
your
have that
point of view.
conversation?
Yeah, so we're very good at analyzing the property, the neighborhood, the property value itself. One of our founding principles was always to advise our customers on where to invest, whether it's a splurge item or where you can spend a little bit less, like on an entry-level material. The goal is to always avoid overinvestment. I mean, there are times where a client wants that $8,000 Toto toilet that does everything for you.
Right.
And if they're adamant about it, then that's going to make them happy by all
Right.
means. But if there's ways that we have to stretch a budget as much as possible, we're good at saying, okay, invest here, like a nice countertop or a beautiful backsplash or very nice appliances, especially if the customer's cooking all the time, or maybe just refinish the hardwood in your foyer rather than doing a custom mosaic. So there's workarounds to still achieving the elevated, sophisticated feel that a client wants, but still making sure that we don't go crazy, because these little additions over again adds up. And it becomes real money at the end of the day.
Anjali, what about things that are trending? You know, whether it's materials, whether it's a look, whether it's a piece of furniture, because you guys get involved in everything. Trends oftentimes, and we know this in any business, okay,
Yes.
they come and they go. And sometimes
I
they
was
go
about to say.
faster than
Right.
we really
About
want
to
them to
say.
go. How do you deal with that when someone says, hey, but I want this because it's really hot right now,
Yeah.
or it's trending right now? Is it the right thing for them to do or not?
So we don't really follow trends in that way. So if you say to me, there's a certain color that I really like, right? And if there's a color that's trending and it speaks to you, what we try to do as a firm is really understand the holistic sense of what a family is and how they live and what they respond to. You learn that by looking at what somebody wears, what they come in with, what they respond to in photographs. When you go to a showroom, what do they pick out, right? And then you start to see what colors they respond to. So now, right now,
interesting, yeah.
Jade green is on trend.
Yes.
I happen to love jade green.
Me too.
So I think but I also think it's a color that stands the test of time, right? So if I put jade green on your home, I'm not worried about, oh my God, I'm going to hate it tomorrow, right? So in that way, we're happy to go with the trend. But otherwise, I think good design has to stand the test of time. You don't want to come back in 3 years and say to me, oh my God, bloody hell, I can't live in this room. So.
Well, I did that. You know, I'm old enough to remember. You guys probably don't. When I bought my first condo up in Westchester way back when, and seafoam green and peach
Yeah.
and whatever was the
no.
trend. That's what, Johnny, don't get me started.
Hey, it's all right.
And I did the whole, whatever. And then I was living there for maybe a month and thought, are you out of your mind?
Yep.
And there was another word in the middle of out of.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I thought, really? And why? Because it was trending.
Exactly.
And everybody had it. And I
Yeah.
said, I'm buying a new place and it's my first place, whatever, and I have to be, like everyone else. Oh, I hated it.
Yeah.
Hated it. So question there is, how often do people decide on something with your advice or not, and then come back and say, you know what, the color's just not working for me? Does that happen?
Not often, but on the rare occasion.
Yeah, I agree. It's
On
a
the
rare
on the
occasion.
very rare occasion.
But I think when you start with somebody, and as Johnny mentioned, there's a marriage between you and your
Oh,
client, right?
100%.
So when you start out, I think, for instance, we're not one size fits all. We're really the firm you hire if you want somebody who's really going to listen to who you are, because each one of us is unique, right? Just like you spoke to New York. New York City has so many apartments, and you're shocked till today when you walk into another one, and it's so different from what you expected when you looked from the ground, right? So we're trying
And
to
we
design...
see them all as real estate agents, believe me. In a day, we can see 5 or 6 different
Exactly.
looks,
And
right?
it's amazing.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find the uniqueness in you. We're trying to design an apartment that's specific to you. We're not trying to design just for everybody to have the same thing.
In principle and theory, that sounds wonderful, but I have to maintain
Yeah.
my thought. I walk into so many places, and I oftentimes think, what is this person thinking of? How can they be so bad or so off
Yeah.
in their
Yeah.
not only colors, but in their design choices?
I think we're all like that, right?
And I'm
Little-
like, well, if they're going to come to a designer and say, I want this, and you kind of go through your thing, and they want to end up kind of where they currently are,
and then you just say no.
Thank you. I would be horrified. So I would just say, no, that's just not going to
Yeah,
work.
just no.
But I understand why people get into those scenarios where they love so many different things, but just because you love so many different things
I know,
doesn't
but-
necessarily mean they go together.
Right.
So that's where having a designer really
Helps a
comes
lot.
into play,
Yeah.
where we can create that sophisticated, beautiful space for you with all the things you love, but also holding your hand and maybe introducing you to something that you may not have been privy to before.
Right.
Because this is not something that our clients are doing every single day.
Exactly.
I renovate dozens of properties a year, and they're say an accountant,
Yeah.
for example,
Yeah.
right? They're much different industry.
And the resources that you have
Right.
access to that you're seeing every day.
That's correct, but again, it's kind of probably what am I trying to say? Not easy to get people to kind of come into your way of thinking, even when they hire you and say, "Hey, look, I want to change things. I want to upgrade, whatever. I want to make my apartment really beautiful." But I walk into so many places and I look around and I think, "Oh boy, does this need an update? Oh,
Yeah.
does this need a renovation?
Yeah.
Please call somebody to
Yeah.
come in here and help you out."
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it's not even bad; it's real bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can't even imagine what you all walk into. But let's talk a little bit about the process, okay? We'll get more into the design aspect in a minute, but the process. So you go in, you're the interior designer, you're the people who are going to, carve out that footprint. And by the way, I think you said it before, Johnny, it all comes down to trust. Your client has to trust you.
100%.
They have to trust you
100%.
completely, because even in our job, if you don't have that, what I call T word,
Absolutely.
you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So walk us through, you're the first point of contact. All right, Johnny, I want to do this, give me your ideas, whatever. Now, once you decide to go into project, what happens? You got a general contractor, you got subcontractors. How do you coordinate all that? And do you coordinate all that?
So I think what makes our experience much more seamless is that everything is in-house, with the exception of an architect. But we work in conjunction with them, whether they are hired by the client directly or we use the various architects and engineers that we've worked with in the past.
Right.
Everything is in-house, so we are doing 3 services especially. Of course, the demolition team and the installation team, the build team, but also the project management aspect of our services, which to me is the most important part.
Oh,
There's so
absolutely.
many logistics that are involved, so many moving parts. Materials and finishes have to be ordered at very specific times. You don't want them sitting on site for too long. You don't want them delayed. So it's a very intricate dance. Coordinating the amount of team members that we have working on site in a given day so we don't have too little or too many. These are things that usually when someone is hiring a different kind of contractor, they might not necessarily be getting those services, which are very, very important to have. I always tell a prospect that it's kind of comparing apples to oranges when it comes to proposals, because I don't necessarily know what they're offering. Say it's significantly less, there's things to consider when you're bidding multiple jobs to make sure you know what exactly you're getting with each team you're reaching out to. So once we are onboarded, we can start the design phase as soon as possible. I like to make this an enjoyable and fun experience, just really getting to know them. I'm sure you do the same thing, Anjali, where you're just not necessarily asking them like favorite colors, this and that, but just understanding what they do day to day, what makes them happy. Do they like to travel?
Exactly.
You just looking around, you get a good sense of who somebody is. And then again, they're really relying on your expertise to introduce things to them. And I think usually we're doing the vetting process so well now that most of our customers understand that they need that guidance and they're looking to be introduced to something new.
And one-stop shopping is everything. I mean, with all of your people on board to do the entire job, that's quite incredible.
Right. It's evolved quite a bit in the last few years.
Sure,
But
of course.
we found that most of our customers, I would say all, they really appreciate that we're on top of it. Like we are working directly with our team. It's not like we're babysitting another set of contractors, which we've learned along the way. So it makes it easy and somewhat
I was going to ask
enjoyable.
you that, but we've got to take a break. After the break, I want to understand, how it can get a little complicated if it's not a one-man shop where everybody's involved.
Do you have a big move coming up? I'm Scott Nadler with Cross Country Mortgage, and I've got the loan to match your dream home. Whether it's your first or your fifth, I'll make the process quick and easy. Call me today. Let's make it happen.
We are back. Anjali, so following what Johnny just said, I mean, I think it's very important where, you get to have control, and I use the word control, lightly, of the people who are working or who you bring into a project.
That's right.
Because it's only going to make you look better, only going to make you work better. Do you agree with that? Do you not agree with that? How does that really, really work?
No, I agree with you 100%. And I think, again, it goes back to the word you said, trust, right? So whoever you bring onto a project, you have to trust them and they have to trust you.
Yeah.
So as good as they have to be to you, you also have to be good to everybody who works for you and have respect for your team, right? So I think one of the main things between, whether it's between your client, between all the subcontractors that I work with, because I have contractors and subcontractors, but I'm still the project manager. So the client really is interfacing with me, and then I am taking everything else off their plate. So they just put whatever they want onto me, and then I deal with it, right? So I'm talking to everybody else and making sure that process is smooth and stays on track. I think communication is really, really, really important. I think being very honest all the time and very straightforward about what's happening is what keeps a project also going smoothly. Because there are going to be, as you know, in everything, there
Bumps
are
in the
always
road are
going to
going to
be.
happen no matter where you are.
Absolutely.
Always.
So as long as you're really straightforward about it and constantly on top of it, right? Don't push it away. You have to just address it right away and head on and be available. I think that whether, drawings and things go only so far, I think it's boots on the ground that really goes a long way. And I think it really helps a client to know that you're actually physically there. You're there, you're invested in it. Your team are available to them, you're listening to what they say. Similarly, your contractor needs you to listen to what he or she is saying, because there's feedback that they give and they're the ones who know what's inside, and you need to listen to that and make sure that you're addressing it appropriately. So,
Yep. Johnny, let me ask you, and then I'll ask Anjali, because we have this problem in our business too. You're the second interior designer who comes on board with a client because they had one to begin with. They either fired them, they didn't get along mutually, they decided to split up. We have that on the real estate side all the time. A seller gives the listing to an agent, it doesn't work out for whatever the reason is, they take it away, and then they call someone else to come in. And I've been on that, the second side many, many times.
yes.
How does that work in the design business when you walk in because someone is unhappy with the people that were just in there trying to do the job that they want done?
So
Does it make it even more complicated for you?
Not really, because we end up passing on the opportunity. I just think our service starts at the very, very beginning when it's a completely blank slate.
Yeah.
There are times where we've had a past client who worked with a previous designer in a past project or a long time ago, and they're just looking for something different. They want a fresh take rather than working with that previous designer. Not so much whether or not they were dissatisfied or very happy with them.
Yeah.
They just want something new. There have been times where we've bid a job where we could tell that the client, I think their expectations weren't set, or they are having unrealistic expectations themselves. And that's the case.
Unrealistic expectations. I completely agree with them.
Yes.
Right. So we're very good in the early process of figuring out whether or not we're going to have synergy with that prospect. We want to make sure that we're not wasting their time, and certainly vice versa. But we understand that a lot of people haven't been through renovations before, and there's a lot of quirks and nuances, especially with all the regulations in New York City. So as long as we tell people that we have that covered, we've done this hundreds of times, then again, that trust comes into play. But when it comes back to fixing other designers' wrongdoings, it's not so much something that we come across, thankfully.
Anjali, do you kind of walk away from that, or do you kind of take it on full time and say, all right, these people screwed up, and we're going to come in and try and fix it? Because that fix could be problematic.
Yeah.
Because I think my opinion, you tell me if I'm wrong, the client already has a bad taste in their mouth with what already went down.
You said it.
Can you really fix that in their head?
You said it. And I think, so again, I think it's this dance of understanding the client really. And is the client the problem, or was the designer the problem, right? So that's what you've got to gauge.
That's what I was getting at.
Right?
I wasn't going to say it, but you did.
That's what I was getting at.
So who's the problem, right? And if you can see in somebody's attitude, right? And then as you suss that out, if the client is not the problem, because we can be the problem too, if the designer was the problem,
absolutely.
And the client turns out to be somebody lovely, maybe it's an opportunity, because you don't know what could come out of it, right? So then you walk in, but again, you have to be realistic. How much are you willing to spend to fix this? Or are we trying to give it a facelift? Or are we trying to completely go back to it because they've already put out so much money? So now where do you go? And do you see yourself being able to have a vision to take over what was already there? So that's what it is. You have to make that gauge, and is it worth it to you? Is this client going to become somebody who in the long term is going to work with you now? Do you feel a synergy there? And then you take it on. If not, no.
And that important word referral, which we'll get to in a minute. So, Johnny, let me ask you, though, do you feel like clients today are a little more educated than they were, say, 5 years ago in the whole of design and renovation?
It depends. Sometimes they're very educated on the design, the aesthetic side of things. But for the most part, unless you've done it before, not many people are aware of what's truly involved on the construction side,
100%.
especially when renovating an old
100%.
property. The housing stock in New York is well over 100 years old for a lot of the buildings and houses that we work on, especially in the boroughs. So we always let people know what's involved as early as possible. Like, people don't really consider new electrical, new plumbing, especially if a layout is being reconfigured. So there's a lot of these things. And going back to fixing another designer or contractor's work, we always question the craftsmanship on any construction site.
Right.
If there was someone before us, because whether or not they did things to code or they did it in a very good quality way, a lot of times we just end up taking things out and starting fresh, because it's a very high risk business. It's a very liable business too. So we're just covering, of course we want to provide safe and healthy housing for everybody that we work with, but also we need to protect ourselves as well and make sure that we provide, the highest quality standard work as possible.
Quick question, and listen, I've been through, renovations before. Pre-war, easier than post-war, easier than brand new glass construction, as we talked about before the show, because I've sold a lot of, new construction in my life. And I've been flabbergasted about 3 or 4 times where brand new construction, Anjali, and the buyer comes in and decides to rip out everything and start over again. Brand new.
Yes.
Do you see a lot of that?
Yes.
Yes.
All the time.
Why?
All the time.
Then why buy something brand new? Go to an existing building and create your own. That would be my opinion.
I think it would be my opinion as well, but I think sometimes people are maybe after the view that this brand new high-rise offers them.
Yeah,
the location
view.
or the view. And then because they're in the fortunate position to have the funds to do it, that kitchen may not be the exact color they wanted. And when you have the funds, then you decide to make it your own. So you want to live in this building, you want this address, you want this, but you want it to be your own mark on it. So then you bring in your people and you do it. And again, I think everything is, a bit of a romance and a love affair. So if you love the client, everything they do is great, and then you love it and you're like, of course they should do this.
When you have a client that says yes to everything, it's not often, but when it does happen, it's the best.
You're like, oh.
And especially if they're good to deal with, right? You're like, amazing, of course, let's change all this.
I sold a penthouse to a client of mine 17 years ago, okay? And just 3 years ago, he called me and said, it was only a pied-à-terre for him anyway, okay? And I knew he had renovated it at brand new building, okay? That's why I asked the question. I knew he had renovated and changed up things, but I hadn't been in it because he was only in New York maybe 2 times a year, and it sat empty. Renovated the whole thing from top to bottom, sat empty most of the year. So he called me 3 years ago. I said, okay, I'm going to go and see. And it's a building I sell in all the time. So the building staff knows who I am. Got the key, went upstairs. And I have to tell you guys, I walked in. I thought I was in a different building.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Rearranged the rooms.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember who he had used 17 years ago, but it was magnificent.
But this is what
17 years later, it still didn't age. It still looked magnificent.
But
the one more thing.
That's what it is.
The one more thing I will add is, I think that new builds also, because they have to cater to a certain budget, right? So there's also may not be the quality standard that you would do if you hired your own people.
Oh, it was not his quality standard.
But that's what. But even you'll be shocked. A lot of really high-end new buildings, the floors are really thin. They're really not good quality. You can't get a sand out of them.
And the walls are horrible.
Terrible. What about the tiles in the bathrooms? They're really actually not of a quality that I would put into any renovation I'm doing.
Absolutely.
So I don't
you
care
want Vince
what
Rocco's
the project
opinion
is.
For another show.
Yeah.
No, you're 100%
So
right.
that's why you renovate those apartments.
Johnny, talk to me about pre-war. So we understand that people sometimes will upgrade or renovate in brand new.
Yeah.
But in the pre-war world, which most of New York City is, especially in the boroughs, you're talking 100 years old, 80 years old,
Yes.
90. I live in a building from 1927.
Okay.
So, we're talking a long time.
Yeah.
Is it more complicated to pull things out and redo, or is it just like any other renovation?
It's interesting. Ironically enough, we have found that construction methods back then
Much better.
were much better.
Much
Oh
better.
my God,
So-
yes.
Much better.
I know nothing, but I would agree with that.
So
Yes.
Sure.
walls were much thicker. It wasn't sheetrock.
Exactly.
Also, I have a very specific scenario where we do pre-wars all the time, but there are times where we'll do like a building from the 80s. One particular job we did, we went in just to remediate some mold in a room
Yes.
and just paint, nothing crazy. We had some time in between projects. It ballooned to a full gut renovation because the mold took over the entire apartment, and not only was it their unit, the entire building. And it was a
Wow.
40-year-old building.
Wow.
And if you don't have a sensitive to mold while you're living there, you're not going to know. There are
Right.
people who are.
Yes.
I'm not sensitive to it, so if I have mold in my walls, I'm
You
not
don't
going to
know.
know it until
Regardless,
somebody
it's
tells
not
me
a
about
good scenario to be breathing
It is
that in every
not.
single day. So
It is
we
not.
we remediate mold. We're certified in that. So
I was
we
going to
always-
say you've got to be certified in
Yes,
that, right?
so we
Yeah.
take care
Yes.
of that. But, yes, we were, I don't want to say happy because it wasn't a great scenario for the
Yes.
customer, but they took it in a positive light and said, look, this is an opportunity to really create this space our own, really put in some nice quality materials.
Yeah.
But going back to Anjali's point, these new developments are all on a budget.
Yeah.
And there are many times where I'll walk into a new dev that's a $20 million space.
Correct.
And they're using, don't get me wrong, Floor and Decor, there's a time and a place for their finishes, but they're not using anything that's
No.
out of the ordinary or something
No.
that's special. So it's something where if you don't have that eye, you're going to miss it. Or you might just think it's beautiful and that's great. But I think there is a level of quality that you must meet once you hit it, when you're hitting a certain price point. So it's very interesting to see that in the new development world. I just love working in older spaces to transform. We live all very differently now than these buildings when they were originally built.
Oh, 100%.
So it's
But the
cool.
thing is, too, when you start breaking walls down, even on the new side,
Yes.
you don't know what you're going to find behind.
No.
And there are also some buildings that clients tell me that building requires you to update the electrical
Yes.
and the plumbing,
plumbing.
in some cases.
Most.
When you're doing a renovation.
Most
If you're not doing a
buildings.
renovation, okay, most buildings, you don't have to necessarily do it right away. How does that, affect cost when they're thinking about a brand new sleek kitchen or a beautiful bathroom, and now all of a sudden you're like, well, according to your building management, which we'll talk about after the break, they tell me we have to do the electric because it hasn't been done in 100 years or whatever. How difficult is
Well,
that?
one of the first things that we look at on a walkthrough is the electrical box.
You do.
A lot of times, especially in older buildings,
Always.
99% of the time, it's not adequate for modern appliances. So it requires running new electrical anyway. And going back to communication, how imperative that is, we will say a lot of the budget will be things that you won't see.
Yeah.
But it will allow you to create
But
that beautiful
Well,
space
further to
well,
that,
that's it.
in a pre-war building, you have to bring it up from the basement.
Correct.
So if you live on floor 17, that electrical, if you want to upgrade your washer dryer, now add a heated floor in your bathroom, and you don't have enough, that's got to come up every single floor. So that really changes the price, right? Not just that we have to take the plumbing back to the stack, because we do in every renovation that we do,
Right.
but that we have to bring it up from the basement to add to it.
Well, and again, the unhidden, costs and expenses of that, people are not thinking about that.
No, they're
not
not.
considering that. So does that change their decision to go forward with renovation, or does it not?
Sometimes it will. And, we understand fully that we're not going to win everybody over. There's a lot of moving parts for us in our industry for a client to move forward. Usually it's a numbers thing, and understanding what our value is. If they're looking for something just to get like a quick fix done, and they don't need the services that we provide, then that's great. I'm happy that you're going to get ultimately what you want. But other times there is a need for services like ours. People have their everyday
Yes.
life to worry about, let alone reconfiguring an entire property. So we're good, especially in the vetting stage. I keep going back to that, but we tell
But I
people,
would add one more point to that. Maybe there's a compromise. Maybe you bring that up and you do all that electrical work, but you buy a couch that's less expensive.
Right.
So maybe there's a way that you have a trade-off, right? So you work with them to achieve what they want. So if there's an overarching number that they're striving to reach, you can still work it out because you can cut somewhere else that won't show, and they can still then pay that and you're actually upgrading the bones of your apartment, so that has value in it eventually in resale.
Yeah, of course it does.
So-
All right. So we talked before about there are bumps in the road. Sometimes, ideally we don't want any bumps, but
Yeah.
sometimes there are. What do you do when something goes wrong in a project and you're sitting there? I mean, we all watch TV and
Yeah.
they're over dramatized and, oh my God, I got to talk to the owners
Yeah.
and it's not going to go well. How do you handle that? Because
Tell-
things do go wrong.
Tell the truth right away.
Yes.
As soon as it happens, no bullshitting. Absolutely communicate it straight on because
I love
it's
it.
going to happen.
I love it.
Tell the truth and then say how you're going to mitigate the problem. What are your solutions to this? Okay, there's a problem. You and the contractor have to be hand in hand and decide these are the things that we can do. These are the professionals we're going to involve. These are the ways we can mitigate the problem. We're being very honest. This is what's happened. Most people they may be thrown off right away, but most people are reasonable about it. They understand. If you're straightforward and you don't try to finesse them. Just tell them the truth.
What's the strangest thing that has happened in your world? Not that it happens regularly, but
Yeah.
bump in a road, something goes wrong. What's like one of the stranger things that have gone on
Well, last year
that needed to be mitigated
Yeah.
and fixed and whatever?
So every project is very individualized, down from the property to the people. So every case is
Yes.
very different from the other. We do renovation loan projects as well. And in those cases, the budgets are usually set before we're even bidding on the job itself. There's a lot of nuances with that I can get into in another day. But based on the home inspection, the budget was set. And then when we came in as contractors,
Yeah.
the house was on the verge of collapsing. It was a beautiful brownstone in Bed-Stuy. And they had this whole wish list, this entire scope
Yeah.
of work that essentially got thrown out completely because most of the budget that they got before we got involved was for all these finishes, but now it had to
Yes.
go to structure. So where many contractors would have walked away from a situation like that, we got very nitty-gritty with them to ensure that all the stuff that had to get done structurally was done, but also just to get them in the house, and then we could come back in a later phase and finish other spaces. So if you have a team that's really diligent about making sure that this is as seamless and as smooth as possible despite these headaches, then those hiccups or those humps along the way will get smoothed out eventually, but it all depends on who you're working with. Not everyone will have the capacity or the desire to work around those quirks and surprises.
All right, we have to take another break. A word from our sponsor coming up. We're going to come right back, so don't go anywhere.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business. And it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
We are back. Let's talk a little bit about the process, okay? You go talk to a client, similar to what we do.
Yes.
You're approved. They like you. They want you. They want your services. They want your your teams, whatever. Now it comes down to, okay, we got to start the project. There are alteration agreements. There are all kinds
Yes.
of co-op
Yep.
board
Yes.
things that are necessary. Condo
Yes.
boards included. Walk us quickly, Johnny, through that process. What do you need from others than the owner of the apartment to get the job begun and then finished?
So
Department of Buildings.
we try to ask the client for as little as possible in that sense, because there are a lot of moving parts. But initially, we always ask for the alteration agreement, which gives us essentially everything that we
Correct.
need, such as hours of operation,
Which
any-
is key. hours of operation.
very
right,
much so.
right. License and insurance requirements, believe it or not, it is different by building. And
Totally.
Manhattan is a little bit more of a beast than it is to renovate in the boroughs.
And changed since COVID too, don't you
Absolutely.
find?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
much.
Oh, sure.
Among other things, if we have to do any sort of architectural drawings to file permits, all of that stuff is done before we start swinging hammers. And then we're also designing at the same time, especially if that timeline is very short.
Right.
For me, the most nerve-wracking part of this business is presenting a design after we've spent weeks sourcing and designing and sitting down with them, because they can either love everything. Most of the time, tweaks have to be made along the way, and that's expected. But you're just praying to God that they don't hate it, based on these in-depth conversations.
Co-op board approvals, Department of Buildings. I mean, I've been involved in combination apartments. In fact, I just sold a combination in Gramercy Park about 2 years ago where I expected all kinds of drama because I didn't think the permits were opened and closed properly. They weren't all paid for, whatever. We found a buyer, and I will say, much to my surprise, and I love my seller, and I shouldn't have doubted him because I know he's that anal kind of person anyway. There was not one open permit. Everything was closed.
Yeah.
Everything was done perfectly. The board signed off on everything.
That's unusual.
Very unusual.
Yes, unusual.
So, that's what I'm getting at. So Department of Buildings, how often do clients try and work around that? And you shouldn't, but I know that there are situations where we just recently found out that a renovation in the kitchen was done and it wasn't approved by the DOB.
We don't do that. We will absolutely not work on a project and work around that because it's dangerous.
Yes.
It's actually, you live in a...
can't sell it. When you go to sell, it's going to be a
but
problem.
over and above that, in New York, we live in a community and you're living with other people. So you have to have the respect for the integrity of the entire building because you could start off a leak or some problem that would damage the entire building. And then what are you going to do? So that's just not the way we
opens
work.
Pandora's
we
box when
we
you
don't
cut
take
corners
on
like that.
if a client wants us to cut a corner, that is absolutely from a point of view of electrical and plumbing, because that's a fire, that's a leak.
Well, that goes with your professionalism, and I agree with you. You cannot avoid that kind of stuff because then if something does pop up,
Absolutely.
someone comes back and says, well, did you file this or did the board approve that?
That's
many
your reputation.
Many times with combinations, people buy the apartment next door and all they
Yes.
want to do initially, they say, is open the wall. So
And
they'll
that's it.
have the cousin, the uncle, the brother come on the weekend and bing, bang, boom, there's a doorway now into the new apartment. That's illegal.
Yes.
The board doesn't know about it.
Yes.
The DOB doesn't know about it. And I tried to sell a combo at one point. We didn't know, and we got a
You
call.
can't.
And the buyer's attorney, I was representing the buyer, said, Vince, we got a whole bunch of problems here. I said, okay. And I said to my buyer, we're going to run fast and go buy something else.
Yeah.
You can't cut corners on this kind of
You
stuff.
cannot.
Talk to me, Johnny, a little bit about on the high end. Okay, we have all kinds of price points in this town, whether you're buying something or renovating and designing something. On the very high end, are there specific materials that higher end clients are looking at, color palettes, that seem to be trending in that arena versus others or not?
Again, it's very individualized. So whether I'm working on an entry-level renovation or I'm working on a high-end renovation, their styles could be super ornate and classic, or it can be ultra-contemporary. I think when you're working with a higher-end client, I think the ability to introduce more custom solutions for them becomes more paramount, where you have the chance to, instead of just doing a kitchen, not bare bones, but just doing a space, like then next to it you can do custom built-ins for your china, things like that.
Right.
Paint is paint, right? So if they're open to it, they can do a very bold color, which to me, I'm seeing a lot of color these days, going back to the trends conversation. But I think everything is very expensive now. So when you do have the chance to work with a higher end client, your options are a little bit more open to, finding
Correct.
really beautiful wood for cabinetry, or if you want to do a natural stone versus a quartz, they both have their pros and cons.
What is the color du jour today? Is there one particular color today? Because as we talked about, in my experience, peach and seafoam green, and it's like,
Never again, Vince.
Gray.
Never again.
never.
Well,
again.
you said jade green.
I think jade
Sage
green.
is
Jade
also
green, I'm
really.
sorry, I forgot about
Sage and
that.
jade green seem to be the color, right? And I think they're beautiful. Now,
I like those colors.
I do
actually.
too.
I really do
One
like those
more
colors.
thing that I'll say is, I would say a decade ago, we were much more gray.
Yes.
And I think we're moving to a warmer
Warmer
palette.
Started.
But I think in general, there's a return to a warmer tone, and people are searching for that. And I don't know whether that's because we're in a post-COVID world and we're looking for that warmth, or what's going on in the world generally. But there is a move towards a warmer tone, and I think even the greens speak to that, because the greens sort of bring nature inside. And
I think you're right. I think warmer and nature and
Yes.
comfortable kind of resonate.
Cocooning.
All these other colors that have trended,
yes,
for lack of a better word, throughout the years, were colder, were more stark. And I think that went along with, the kind of sleek. I want everything to be
Yes.
sleek.
The
and I want
hotel vibe.
The hotel vibe, exactly, which is fine. The minimal look, which is not my look at all.
Yeah.
But that kind of, those colors kind of went with that. But talk a little bit about, guys, about, the influence of, social media and all of the influencers out there. Do you think on any level that any of that is affecting design at all? It doesn't really affect people buying or selling homes, but I think it might have a little bit to do with maybe when they pick their colors or when they pick their designs. Do you think social media has any, social media is like controlling everything these days.
Absolutely everything.
Yeah.
I think it's just a new way to get inspired. It's funny. I don't know how often your clients are looking at Pinterest mood boards anymore.
Yeah.
Sometimes
God, I
they
haven't
are,
done that
sometimes
in a
they're
while.
not.
Yeah.
But I follow many designers a lot where I'm learning so much from
Me
them, and
as
just
well.
like
Oh,
how
sure.
they source
Yeah.
things, how they explain their design process to a customer. Which, if you can't sell your design to somebody, then what are you doing in this business? So it's a very careful. A very intricate way to explain how I came up with this design for a customer based on everything we talked about.
Right.
So, I think the influencer, there's pros and cons to it, of course, but I do think that it's just a new way to visualize rather than just seeing kind of things stuck on a mood board. You can see it in real life.
Yeah, I think, that kind of is like a cop-out when you're looking at something and you really don't put yourself into, the creation of a design or a color or something that you're going to do that's going to really kind of reflect, like Johnny said before, the hotel luxury feel. It's kind
Yes.
of barren and minimal and not necessarily a home.
Yes.
Right.
So I think it depends on the age of the client as well. So if you get a
Correct.
younger customer,
Correct.
they're much more social media savvy.
Yeah.
If you get somebody who's closer to my age, not so much. Are we really following those things? Not as much, right?
Yeah. I look at them, but I don't necessarily take stock in it.
So I think but a younger generation is much more involved in
Oh,
that.
absolutely.
So with them, yes, I think that again, but back to Johnny's point, it could be an inspiration and then you use what was that inspiration to sort of derive what did they like out of that, right? Out of that social media post that they saw.
Yeah.
What were they actually drawn to?
Yep.
And then you can sort of cull that out. But with older people, I don't think so. I don't think
We're
it
also
has.
really fortunate to live in a very global city where a lot of our
Absolutely.
clients are well-traveled and they pick
Extremely.
things up along the way. So in a sense,
Which
you're
makes
almost,
it exciting in itself.
right, but you're
Very.
and you're almost designing around these curated things that they absolutely
Absolutely.
love. There's a
love
feel
Yes.
to these things.
Yeah.
Rather than just kind of picking something randomly because
And building
you have to.
around that
and
or
speaks to their
designing and creating
personality
around
and
that.
their journey, their journey towards what it is.
Well, to what you said before, it's their personality that
Yes.
you're keying off of with that, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
And designing around that. I think that's pretty key. I mentioned before supply chain issues, post-COVID. During COVID and post-COVID, we had a lot of that. I was working in a new development where we postponed closings for about 4 months
Yes.
because we could
Yes.
not, and the buyers were out of their minds. And of course, as a sales director, I was getting hammered every day. But because we
course.
couldn't get the appliances, they were coming from, I don't
Yes.
even remember where. And one day I went into
Yes.
the developer's office and started yelling. And I told our boss over here, I went yelling and screaming and said, cancel the effing appliances,
Yeah.
okay? Because we're getting crucified here. And go out and buy them locally. Who cares?
Yeah.
As long as you put an amendment to the offering plan, they
Yes.
can't say anything about it. He did. We started closings in weeks.
yes.
You're waiting for months for a refrigerator and a
Oh, my
dishwasher and a
goodness,
Yeah.
been there.
Yeah.
We've all been there, and I was like out of my mind over it. But has that continued, or has it gotten better, or what's the deal with this?
So it's interesting. Yes, it's gotten much better with appliances and things like that. However, we're starting to see another whole change. I'm finding the supply chain of fabrics has really, really been affected lately.
Interesting.
And I
Coming
think
from where?
So honestly, almost
All over.
anywhere. And I
okay.
think the tariffs are going to be really, really detrimental to us, because even if a sofa is made
Really?
here, right? Even if the sofa is made here, the screws may come from China, and there's a part that's coming from Italy. So even though it's assembled here and the team is local, the company is local, the parts are not local. So we're really, really going to be in a bad state, because everything is already, we're getting notices from everybody about price increases and time increases. So yes, I think our supply chain is going to be extremely disrupted.
We of course see it too, especially on the supply side when it comes to getting new tools, sheetrock,
Yes.
anything really. But we work extensively with vendors where we get the best competitive pricing as we
Yes.
possibly can. If we're able to pass that on to the customer, we will. We want to make this as enjoyable as possible, and when we keep saying over and over again that prices are going up, it turns people off from
Yes,
even
absolutely.
considering renovating.
Absolutely.
So
Well, I
we
wanted
do
to-
what we can.
I wanted to ask you that because, and I don't like to use the word tariff, but we'll talk about it, seems to be increasing pricing across the board all over the place. I have to imagine that when you're out there sourcing materials that you need to use, or, finding fabrics or whatever, that you're seeing an increase in pricing. And as you just said, Johnny, people are starting to say, well, maybe I'm not going to renovate right now. Maybe I'm not going to change my design right now. We, on the real estate side, are seeing buyers stand
Pulling
back
back, yeah.
and saying, okay, until things kind of stabilize, we all know how, buyers and sellers think in this town, who also become clients of yours.
Yep.
Is it really affecting their decisions to move forward on a renovation, or is it kind of not yet?
Not yet.
It's hard to tell. Sometimes maybe it might push them going towards more of a new development, or something that is maybe a little bit more cost effective than initially planned, and maybe doing things in phases or doing the work themselves. Again, every scenario and everyone's financial situation is vastly different. But I will say, I think, things are slowing down in that regard. Then initially, if people are buying less, then people are essentially renovating less. But we pivot and we find customers.
And I think the key word in Johnny's statement is pivot, right? If you're willing to say to a client, listen, this is what it is, but we'll still make it work. We'll find creative ways to make this work, and we can make this happen, right? So maybe we're not going to do now, sorry, Italians, maybe we're not going to do an Italian kitchen. Maybe we're going to
What do you have
decide.
against Italian kitchens?
Come on now.
Maybe I'm not bringing a Scavallini kitchen in, but maybe I'm just going to go to Long Island, and, Gary Chufo is going to build you a wonderful kitchen.
Correct.
So it's making those changes. And if your client, and I think clients also are going to be, if you can show them that the product would be, as beautiful, maybe a little bit different than their expectation, but beautiful, we're going to have to pivot and be creative.
Again, the value of having a team really looking out for the best interests of our customers. And I think
Things are going to go up, of course, anyway.
Absolutely.
So you got to mitigate that and fix that.
And I will say, I think because I think the customer service experience across the board has diminished quite a bit. You're paying more for less.
Oh, 100%.
Yes.
Right? So
100%.
So I think our service is 100% customer service. So I think people are yearning for that experience. So to them, it's a premium, or it's a luxury that they're certainly dying to have. And if they're willing to renovate with all this negative stuff going on, it's our duty in a way.
And we're grateful that we're grateful
Yes.
to them, right? So we're willing to pivot. We're willing to make compromises. We're willing to get creative. We're willing to dig our heels in and say, we're going to figure this out. And I will say that it's been interesting to see at the D&D building, the feedback that when you give this feedback, they're also trying to pivot. They're also trying to find fabrics that are at a lower price point so we can still keep doing this. So it's everybody sort of working hand in hand together to make this work for all of us.
You mentioned the D&D building. I haven't walked through that
Yeah.
building in years. I used to love. I had a friend who was a designer
It's
years
fun.
ago.
Yeah,
I
it
used to love
sure
to walk
is.
through
It
it.
sure is, yeah.
Oh, I used to love it. And
Every
even
floor
with
is
my-
different.
Yeah.
Every floor is different. And when I was helping the developers, here for our new development division, create or come up with what I'd say, go to a designer, go to one of the,
Yeah.
which sometimes they did, or sometimes they would drag me to the building and say, hey, what appliance do you like better? Or what about, I'm like,
Yeah.
you want my opinion? I'll give it to you, but that doesn't mean it's right, But I used to
Don't
love.
doubt yourself, Vince. I'm sure you have great taste.
well-
besides the peach, but
That was almost
seafoam green.
forced on me. I'm like, I will never.
Do it again.
I can't even look at it, even in the store when I see the peaches in the bin. I'm like, no, I
take it
can't
away
look at
from me.
I can't look at the color. Are clients looking more for sustainability these days, or is it kind of just, daily routine or whatever? What is it that they might be looking for that's different than in the past? Sustainability is one thing that comes to mind. How is that working these days?
I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this.
So I think it's quite interesting, right? I think some people are concerned about it, like really concerned about it, and some people really couldn't care at all,
Less, yeah.
right?
I
100%.
So it's a mix, but
I
I
see that.
think the onus also is on us to be more sustainable, right? So as designers, contractors, architects, I think we have to bring that piece to it. Now, some of the things are already moving towards that. For instance, even just the way floor heat is done because it's much more energy efficient, right? Our light bulbs are more energy efficient than they used to be. So I think you have to start to educate the client on how this is also going to be better for them in terms of the energy they're using, so therefore also in their cost. So because eventually you're spending less on your electrical bill. I think AC systems have to be sort of revamped because there are people who go away to the Hamptons all summer and then they're running the air conditioning. So what is the way that we can make that, because it's not the right thing to do, right? So how can you be more sustainable? Put shades in. There are materials that are coming in and they're available to you that are at the same price as something else that is more, eco-friendly. So I think we have to educate. And when you start to educate the customer, I think they're quite willing to listen.
Yep. And going with the HVAC, for example,
Yes.
we do one of two things. Either the split units that you see in
Correct.
many apartments. The pros to those systems, although they've gotten a lot slimmer over the years,
have.
they've been very ugly in the past, but they're getting better. And there's ones that sit in the building that are in the ceiling that are flush. You can run them when you're in the room, or you can turn them off, and you
Yes.
can have things in zones. Whereas if you do traditional HVAC, which we also do, you're cooling the entire house.
Right.
So that costs a lot of money. A lot of customers too, on the appliance side, yes, there's this move towards electric stoves and ovens, which has been going on for quite some time.
Yes.
But a lot of our customers are preferring it.
I found the same thing.
Which I found very
Me
surprising.
too,
You-
me
You're
too.
gonna say Vince, really, but I'm a gas.
So,
Oh,
so,
me too,
so are
me
we.
too. So
I'm a gas range.
Me
I go to
too.
my family on the weekend and it's this electric nonsense. I'm
Yeah.
like,
I don't
leave
even know
me
how to
alone.
use it.
I don't either.
But you know what people
And
are
things
saying
burn.
is, so
Yes.
what they're saying is that on the low functions, right, on the sim and everything, that it actually does very well, and people are happy with it. So
Induction too is another
Yes.
popular
I was just
one
going to
that we're
say
doing.
induction. Oh, yeah.
Very
In the
popular.
beginning, though, when you had an induction range, you had to have certain pots.
Right.
I think you still do for them.
Do you still do?
Yeah.
I heard sometimes, yes. I'm like, I don't even say that name to me.
Yeah.
And I was selling a development 2 years ago that was all induction. And I have to
Oh,
tell you something.
that's a tough sell.
People would come in and say,
Yeah.
is that an induction top? And I'm like, yes, it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, not for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I change it? I'm like, well, you can put
Yeah.
electric.
yeah.
And this goes back to our point of really getting to
They're
know
awful.
people.
Who would
Yes.
design that?
Whether they got a good deal on the appliance
Yeah,
and they
you
bought them
don't
in
know.
bulk, you never know.
Oh,
but
never
well,
know.
there you have it.
everybody lives so differently.
So differently.
So what works for me might not work for Anjali, right? So it's really understanding how they live, what they do, whether or not they cook every single day, what their budget is too. The budget is the most important thing. And then we kind of back
Always.
into it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
kind of like Tetris. Just tell me what your all-in number is, and then I can tell you how much you need to spend on countertops, how much you need to
Yeah.
spend on appliances, flooring, etc. So you get strategic.
Oh, exactly. All right, we have a minute left. Anjali, give me your impression on where do you think New York City residential design is going in the next 5 years? We know where we came from. We know where we are currently. Where are we going in 5 years? Will it change significantly or not?
I don't think it will change significantly. I think residential design will sort of hold just because your home, I think, is going to become more important as the outside world becomes more uncertain. So when things are more uncertain,
Interesting thought.
I think your home becomes really even more of a safe haven. I think what will change is that we're going to have to be much more creative about the way we employ funds. So that will change. But apart from that, I don't think design will change. I do think this trend of nature, sustainability. I think we're going to see more awareness, and I think we're going to see more kindness in it. I think we realize
We
this
like
city,
the word kind.
I think this city is very good. We come together when things are rough.
We do.
And I think we're really going to come together even in this way. I think we're going to really be kind to each other and help each other. And I think design is going to be a way that really reflects that feeling of providing a safe haven, bringing nature in, and softer, just softer, to soften the harsher edges that we're feeling.
I will say that the new development world, I think, will continue to move along just as fast as it currently is. But I think it's because people are living much differently now than they were previously in the past. People want those amenities. They want the tall ceilings. They want the big windows, which is why you tend to see a lot of those glass boxes. But when it comes to curating the inside of your space, I think the warm tones are still going to play a really key role. Kind of introducing maybe a more toned down version of charm and detail, but having those layers to make something feel a little bit more interesting and cozy. I think that stark, modernism might start to fade away a little bit. But again, just because it's not necessarily the hot thing right now doesn't make it necessarily bad. It's just what anyone's personal taste is. But I think there are ways to introduce trendy things, but are easily changeable once those things kind of die out, like a throw pillow or an area rug, rather than doing some super trendy backsplash that you'll have to rip out.
Or a piece of art that's trendy.
Right,
Right.
You said the word soft before. It reminds me on the way home I have to stop at CVS because I changed 2 light bulbs in my bathroom yesterday, and I don't know what...
You have to buy 2,700K only.
I don't know what Anjali, I don't know what I bought, but I turned the light on this morning and it was like 6:30 in the morning and I felt like these
You're in a
lights.
dentist office.
I said, no,
Soft
they're not soft.
2,700K.
I don't know what I was thinking about when I bought them. I obviously was in a hurry. I grabbed them and they're all wrong. They're going in the garbage and I'm buying new ones on the way home. We're coming right back with my thoughts for the week. Don't go anywhere.
Hey, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you hear a lot about how crucial it is to have the right partners in this industry. At Roadway, we don't just move your clients, we give them an experience they'll love. Specialized services to our white glove treatment, it's all about making sure your clients feel taken care of every step of the way. And if you're looking for a rewarding referral program, reach out to me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back with my thoughts for this week. Renovations and design play a critical role in the ever-evolving landscape of New York City real estate, as we just talked about. In a city where space is limited, buildings are often over a century-year-old, and every neighborhood has its own architectural character. Thoughtful renovation is both an art and a necessity. Whether updating a pre-war co-op on the Upper West Side or transforming a loft in Tribeca, homeowners are looking not just for cosmetic upgrades, but for smart, functional design that honors the space's history while adapting it to modern living. High-end renovations in New York City require a deep understanding of building regulations, co-op board requirements, and the intricacies of aging infrastructure. At the same time, design must reflect the personal tastes and lifestyles of clients who demand quality, longevity, and uniqueness. In this market, a well-renovated home doesn't just look beautiful, it enhances livability, boasts property value, and sets a standard, for craftsmanship and innovation in one of the world's most competitive real estate arenas anywhere. And that's our broadcast for today. Thanks to my guests for being here on set with me. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, TikTok, at Vince Rocco. And Confucius says, choose a job you like and you will never have to work a day in your life. And the only person you should try to be better than is the person you were yesterday. And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network, to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us. I am grateful, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.